Hi, it's Paolo. Today I want to teach you how to recognize the taste of real old tree puer. It's a subject that is quite difficult to talk about. This knowledge is quite difficult to get. There are two main reasons why it's difficult. The first one is it is objectively quite complicated to explain without being in the same place as somebody else. And so you really need, in order to learn this properly, most people will have had to go to Asia and really drink tea with a proper, real tea experts for a long time. Certainly nothing like this that I am attempting to do now, an online explanation has ever been available that I know of. I wish it was, it would have saved me a lot of time. The second reason it's hard to get this knowledge is because even some people that know don't want you to know, because clearly, if you're able to tell what is old tree puer, you will start to understand, you will start to see just how many fakes and how many young tree puer are sold as old tree, and how many old tree puer are really 10, 20, 30% old tree at best. And yeah, if you know, you will stop buying that kind of tea. So even some people that know do not want you to know. So where to start? I think the first thing is, I mentioned before, in order to really understand this, I had to go to Asia, and particularly to Taiwan and Malaysia, which is where most serious tea experts still are. Well, the thing is changing. Nowadays, there might be more new people in China as well. But for the old generation, that's very much in Taiwan and Malaysia. So two of my main teachers have been Lin Ping Xiang, probably the most knowledgeable expert about tea in the world, certainly about Gongfu tea, and certainly of the English speaking. There might be others that speak Chinese that I don't know. And then Chen Huayang, which is the founder of Chen Hao, and really, together with Lu Zhen, the pioneer of why we drink old puer today. So he was, one of the two key people that really established the idea of drinking ancient tree puer and old tree puer in the late 90s. Before this, from the 50s to the 90s, there were virtually none. So not only I've learned this from them, but we've done all sorts of really systematic tests. So for example, we've got a cake that was made from the same place, but one is a young tree puer, or the other one is old tree puer. It confirms our understanding. We tried all sorts of tea that we understood were made with a certain blend of this being old tree puer and young tree. And it's all confirmed. So we've done it in the most scientific and reproducible way as possible. And this is the same way in which I'm going to teach you right now. Just to be clear, the idea of quality is not only old tree, of course, there's many other things. When I talked about in the quality standard for the benchmark trees, there are other things like the varietal should be a standard puer varietal, the picking should be the first spring picking, clearly the second spring picking is less quality. The trees, do you know actually a lot of ancient trees have actually been cut down? You see this image of like really big trees, but that's really extremely rare. Very often, even when people say old tree, even if it's true, the trees have been cut down. And also the area is quite important. So tea from certain areas, particularly Xinshubana and other pockets in Yunnan, are much better than others. So for today, I'm gonna drink a 2024 Kozushan. So Kozushan is not in Banna, so it's out of the main classic puer areas. However, this is a king tree. So a king tree is defined, depending who you ask, is more than 4 kilos of maocha. This one was more than 4 kilos of maocha. So that's a massive tree. To put it in context, like a normal ancient tree in Banna makes a kilo, maybe 1.5 kilos if it's very big. Okay, 2 if it's huge. So when we're starting to think like 4 kilos, that's really big tree. And of course the trees, we don't want them just to be big and old, but also healthy. But usually the two things go together, as in the healthiest trees are also the biggest. So this is a Shuang or king tree, and it's the perfect example of what I'm going to be talking about today. It's like literally one single tree and it's as old as you can get. So the ideal thing for this would have to be 2 gaiwans of exactly the same type, and you have them side by side, and then you can just try a tea and the other straight after. I really strongly recommend you to get 2 of the same gaiwans. it will make this so much clearer. If you want to just start trying, and please, I recommend you don't just watch this, you try it, otherwise there's no point, you know, otherwise I'm just speaking. You really need to see whether what I'm saying is true with your own mouth. So anyway, if you just want to try it today, until you can get the two guy ones that are the same, you can simply do it like 2 different sessions. So imagine you have 2 guy ones or another one, you will put, you know, the usual amount you will put in a guy one. It doesn't need to be very big, because in this case we're doing a testing. So, you know, for example, in this guy one I will put about 2.5 grams. And then here's an important thing. You're gonna steep the tea for 2 to 3 times as long as you're used to. This will make the differences, and it will tell the truth of all 3 so much better. And don't worry, because real old tree will not get astringent. It will get bitter, it will get strong, but it will not get astringent. And if you need to know one thing as a prerequisite for this video, is you really have to fix in your mind the idea, the difference between bitterness and astringency. So bitterness is the taste, kind of like a medicine, like a bitter medicine. Astringency is more the feeling that's left in the mouth after you eat a lemon. Or after a lot of harsh teas will leave your mouth, your tongue, and your mouth quite dry. You feel a little bit thirsty, or just dry and quite uncomfortable. This is something you should really, this is like the main thing. Not just for Puerh, not just for ultra Puerh, but it's really like the main thing you want to know and take a look at when you're drinking tea to understand the quality of tea. So this video is for you if you are serious about wanting to know the truth with your own mouth. You do not want to believe the stories, you do not want to just go about randomly, but you really want to test and see with your mouth, like, is this what it's meant to be or not? And I promise, if you start this exercise, you will learn something quite fast, and the results will shock you. What's very common is that, unfortunately, a lot of tea we buy when we didn't know we will not drink again once we see what the quality of really good tea is. Okay, so the first thing we can talk about is appearance. Actually, there is not very much you can say about modern processed tea just by the look of the leaves. It's really quite hard to see, because even productions that are not 100% ancient Puerh can be made to look quite similar, and even big leaves nowadays doesn't mean very much. So not much we can say about that. Aroma. Now, I made a full video about this, so I'm not going to do it a lot, but just in case you haven't seen that. So here's my packet. I smell all the brief. Now, a real ultra Puerh, while you're smelling, the smell is still there. While a young tree Puerh, it will finish quite soon. So maybe I'm at middle of the breath and there's nothing more to go up. I'm not talking about the explosiveness of the aroma and like how much aroma there is. That's the kind of thing you would find, for example, in a cheap perfume. I'm talking about how long it lasts, and 2, how deep it goes up in the nostrils. So I can feel this going all the way deep up here. That's really good. If you try this exercise, try to get, like buckets of about the same kind or cakes of about the same kind, and you inhale at the same time. Sorry, not at the same time. You inhale one after the other, you will see the difference of how high it goes there. Sweetness and aftertaste. So those are probably two of the key things. Easier to see. So I boiled this water to 100. Again, right now we're not necessarily trying to enjoy the tea. We're trying just to find out the truth about what the tea might be. And 100 degrees will help with that. Although normally you might want to do more like 95. That's okay. Speaking of aroma, what I said before about aroma also counts from sniffing from the top of the guy one. So sweetness is quite obvious, right? It's just literally how sweet the tea is. And aftertaste is how much taste, whether it be sweetness, so hui gan particularly is a type of sweet aftertaste. Gan meaning the taste between sweet and bitter. And Huigan, but also the flavor of the tea. So having had just 1 cup of this tea clearly coats my mouth throughout. Lesser teas will take some more time, like maybe 2 or 3 cups. Wine people call this finish. When the aftertaste is extremely good, you feel it, like 30, 60 minutes after the session is finished. Sometimes you eat and you still feel it. On amazing ancient Tree Puer, it will do that. A topic close to this is salivation. So, yeah, salivation is basically will create the feeling of Huigan as well. It's not something you need to pay attention to so much. What you pay attention more to is how comfortable the mouth feel. So for a very old tree tea, the mouth will feel not necessarily salivated, but it will feel moist. Maybe that's a better way of telling it. So yeah, there is a taste of the tea. It feels moist. It feels sweet. And there is no astringency, there is no dryingness at all. There is, both on the tongue and on the side of the mouth, there is no feeling of dryingness at all. Now we'll talk to you about the splash, or how well does the tea first splashes on top of the palate and second goes down in the mouth. So a very ancient Tree Puer will go up really fast. It will splash everywhere into the mouth. Well, any good tea will do that, actually. And then also, it will then, you don't need to swallow it at all. It will not feel stuck. It will just travel completely by itself down the throat. So let me just try that. So the splash is pretty good. Yeah, it's kind of throughout the palate. Can really feel it. And then I didn't have, before I was aware that tea just flowed down. There was it did not, a lesser tea, tea with pesticides will have some of this problem. Lesser quality tea, as in young tree tea, will have this problem as well. You will feel it as it goes down. The more you feel it, the worse quality it is. You might feel it like a tiny bit of constriction, a tiny bit of you have to swallow down. This feeling of swallow, not good. That's indicative of lower quality puer. There is texture or thickness. Now this is quite easy. Everything else equal, more old Tree Puer will feel thicker and more soupy in the mouth. One thing you can do is you can kind of try to, imagine you have the tea in your mouth and you try to move it about and see how much it splits. Now, if you imagine water, it will go kind of everywhere, but something that's a bit more soupy will stay a little bit more consistent together. That's one way you can check. But in general, it will feel like thicker and sweeter. Now, this is not the thicker and sweeter than aged tea will get. That's a different kind of thing. So obviously, aged tea, as it ages, will get thicker and sweeter. So in this case, you want to compare, for example, 2024 tea with 2024. If you compare 2010 not so good quality, young Tree Puer with 2020 old Tree Puer, it's possible 2010 is still thicker because it aged into that. Purity and complexity. So complexity, both defined as in there's a lot of flavor at the same time, and also defined as transformation, as in the tea changes a lot from the beginning to the end, is not necessarily a sign of quality. Particularly complexity in the sense of a lot of taste is simply a sign of blending. So there's just a lot of different source materials. And nobody blends. When you make a blend, it's because you're blending old tree with lesser quality material. That's the reason to make a blend. Otherwise, you make a single estate, single garden, very, very pure thing. So already the fact that there's a lot of different flavors going on can tell you something of the nature of this tea, really. When I said about transformation, it is true, however, that, for example, a single Tree Puer will change a lot from the beginning to the end, and so there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also nothing particularly good. While a blend tea, for example, 100% pure ancient tree is going to be a bit more stable. So you can see transformation over the session as neutral, but the fact that there's a lot of different flavors going on as opposed to a single one, that's points to a tea that's likely to be not as old tree. Yeah, there's very clear one taste to this. So this is a single tree, so we would expect that. So there are three main defects to pu'er. The first one, of course, is astringency. So again, the feeling of the mouth being left dry. If you drink tea stronger, this will become more and more obvious. A lot of tea will just leave you like you cannot drink more because the mouth is so astringent. Or very often, actually, if you haven't drunk tea for a long time, maybe it doesn't bother you so much, but when you start paying attention, then you would really see. Actually, I think that's more the case. Usually I see that for me as well, but for a lot of people I know, in the first 5 years, maybe astringency doesn't bother you so much, but putting your attention there is really what you really want to do to understand more and more about pu'er. So yeah, just the feeling of like the mouth, for good tea, the mouth should be moist, comfortable. There shouldn't be no drying whatsoever. Another defect is pesticide use. So two ways of saying pesticide use. One that's a maybe, that's not necessarily, is kind of like a feeling of tingling, particularly on the top of the throat, on the top of the tongue. And so if you feel this, what you can do is you can remember to check the throat. Now the throat is where you will really see the truth about pesticide use. A tea with pesticide will make your throat feel not 100% comfortable. To define 100% comfortable, you can feel either, you're in very good health, you just woken up and you're drunk, or you drank a tea like this. So you define it as 100% comfortable. And actually, when you start to pay attention, even a lot of foods that we eat will not make you feel that comfortable in the throat. Anyway, for the purpose of tea, there's kind of like a feeling of harshness, like you feel the throat, and with a very good tea, you will feel the sweetness and the aftertaste going down. It's very, very pleasant. But if otherwise you have some feeling in the throat, that can be very likely pesticide use. And particularly if the feeling is the constriction, like the throat is a bit tight, that's almost for sure a sign of pesticide use. Again, we've tested this on a lot of teas that were known to have chemicals on it and not, and that's what we found. And the final thing is storage flavor. So when we talk about old tree, and it's quite rare actually to have tea that stores so much, but since we're talking about it, storage flavor is, again, it will make you feel, it's kind of like this feeling of like hearty, damp earth. Now, that's kind of normal in a show pu'er, but in an old tree pu'er of maybe 10, 20 years of age, that's not normal. Fungus, moldy kind of flavors, and again, it will leave your mouth feeling a little bit thirsty and dry. It's kind of a different kind of, astringency is kind of like biting dryness, while that's storage flavor often is kind of, how to say, thirst. It's a bit more thirst. And also storage flavor and storage problem will also cause problems in the throat. And one way you can test storage flavor, and I'm sure this is not super helpful if you're not very experienced, but after you drank tea, very good pu'er for a while, there's a gamut of flavors that it goes there. If there is a random one, and the tea is a bit stored, that's very, very likely a storage problem. Then we come to yun, or some people translate yun as like rhymes, as in the tea rhymes, like everything is in the right place. I translate it to a sense of being like water. Again, I'm sure if you've not drunk tea for a long time, it's like, why might I want to drink water? Well, because the subtlest things are, everywhere. Like, in incense, and fine dining, in everything that you can really consume and smell. The subtlest things are the most satisfying, ultimately. They do not disturb your system, they do not disturb your mouth, but they're like they're completely present. So yun is very, very hard to talk about, and you could kind of see it as a sum of everything I've been talking about before. But perhaps, a way that I find the most useful to talk about it is this concept of being like water. Like, can you imagine drinking this tea? Like you're thirsty, and you're on a mountain, and you find this this spring. Could you imagine drinking this tea instead of the water? If yes, that it's got this quality of like water. It's like water, but better. One of the things about tea is normally you cannot drink too much of it. Now, too much is very different for many people, but at some point there's a level where it will kind of disturb you. Now if the tea is like water and it has yun, it will not really do that. So this idea of yun and rhyming is kind of like, yeah, everything melting together in a perfect, subtle experience. And finally we have something even harder to talk about, qi. So, or ChaQi, or the energy that comes from the tea. I can tell you some pointers. So one of them is, you will, to feel the qi in the body, there are some places that are easier to see. For example, your palms of both the hands and the feet will feel quite hot and sweaty. Well, hot first and sweaty later. And sweaty only if you're a sweaty kind of person. And the temples actually also can be quite sweaty and quite hot. I can definitely feel this with this tea. I've had only a few cups as I was talking, but it's really, really noticeable how warm my palms are. If you're used to feeling qi in the body, one of the easiest places to feel it is kind of here in the chest and also in the neck. I get my neck quite tight at times, so I do notice when I drink tea like this, it kind of naturally relaxes and unclicks. So like the qi is flowing there. It's very, very noticeable. And one thing to say about qi is it's much easier to notice when you're not, you don't have distractions around. You're just drinking tea and be there by itself. Now, right now I'm only talking about it for the purpose of identifying quality. So very good, so old tree tea, old tree pu'er will have qi. I mean, even big tree pu'er will have qi. But the better quality will have qi that is like smooth, like you really, really feel it, but you're completely comfortable. If you think about like drinking a lot of coffee and the kind of anxiety that brings, that's kind of caffeine without qi. This tea obviously has caffeine too, but the qi kind of really softens it. And particularly if you're drinking it in quiet, you kind of integrate the energy in a way that, if caffeine, anxiety goes like that, this is much more like gentle, steady energy. Yeah, so really, some people cannot feel qi, but if you can feel qi, ancient tree pu'er qi has got a lot of it. The body feels, your body will feel comfortable. And like with this kind of king tree, it's really like, I don't want to say heroin, but it's quite, because I haven't quite tried it, but I imagine it's quite like that. Probably a milder version of it, I imagine. The feeling of comfort. The feeling of, also peace and everything is okayness. It's really, really present. And plus, where you feel it in the body, as I was talking about before. One last thing I need to say is that it is possible to over-oxidize pu'er tea during the processing. Or, to put it better, oxidize it more than usually was done. Now this process will essentially make the tea a bit closer to a black tea and will remove astringency. So I'm not saying that if there is no astringency, then the tea is definitely old tree pu'er. That is not the case. And the lack of astringency needs to go with everything else. In order of importance, I would say that sweetness and aftertaste are the most important thing. So you can tell if a tea is a bit overcooked because of a few things. One is, it feels a little bit closer to a black tea, or what we call Pulong, pu'er oolong, which is very, very common of a lot of modern tea, because when you have very low quality material, young tree, it will be really astringent unless you make it, you cook it quite a lot. So that's why a lot of modern producers, both Western and Chinese, just do this style of tea. Pulong, we call it. But you can tell by that. And also you can tell because if you brew it really hard, like a real old tree pu'er will, it will be exciting, it will be bitter, it will be strong, it will have like a ton of aftertaste. While if everything that's been done to this tea was a young tree pu'er that simply had been overcooked, yes, it's not going to be as astringent, but it's going to lack everything else. So astringency lacking is a necessary condition, but it's not enough by itself to say that the tea is definitely old tree pu'er. So I hope this recap has been enjoyable for you. I hope it's been useful. I really, really hope you're going to go and practice it. Try it out. Try it out as a session. First, you can do like 1 or 2 sessions in a row. Then maybe it can be like your daily thing. You can get the 2-guy one and try everything. if you're serious about Puerh, this is the way to do it. You're gonna have to learn with your own mouth and your own experience. Otherwise, you're always gonna be confused whose stories to listen to, and stories are frankly not very interesting. So this was the best I could do at the moment at sharing this knowledge that's been transmitted to me. Any wisdom is my teacher's, any mistakes are mine. I really, really do hope that you can find this useful and you can find the same joy and satisfaction I've had in really, really learning about Puerh.